Hi guys, we are reading Little Miss Tiny. Please subscribe and like this video. Little Miss Tiny. Little Miss Tiny was actually small, not very tall at all. She was so very tiny she didn't live in a house. Do you know where she lived? In a mouse hole. And the dining room of home farm. She had made the mouse hole quickly, comfortable, really, and likely there weren't any mouse because the farm cat chased them all away. The trouble was because she was so tiny, nobody knew she lived there. Nobody had noticed her, not even the farmer and his wife. So there she lived, all alone, with nobody to talk to. She was very lonely and said, "Oh dear." One day, she was feeling so lonely, she decided to be very brave and go for a walk. Out of her mouse hole she came. She crept across the dining room and went through the crack in the door and into the hall. To Little Miss Tiny, the hole looked as big as a field, and she scurried across into the back door of the farm. Luckily for her, the little box was at the bottom of the floor, and she squeezed herself through it and onto the doorstep. It was a very exciting. There before her was the farmer yard. She went exploring. She came to the door with a crab at the bottom and broke in underneath. There inside was pig, a large pig. And if you as small as Little Miss Tiny, a large pig looked very large indeed. Mr. Tiny looked at the pig. The pig looked at Mrs. Tiny. "Oink," he grunted and moved closer to escape this little person who had until he stayed. Oh my goodness me, squeezed Little Miss Tiny in army and shot out of the pig's as fast as ever her little leg would carry her, which wasn't very fast because her legs were so very tiny little. She ran right around to the back of the pig's before she stopped. She leaned against the wall and put her hands over her eyes and tried to get her breath back. Suddenly, she heard a noise, a very close noise, a sort of breathing noise, very close indeed. Oh, she hardly dared take her hands away from her eyes. But when she did, she wished she had to. What do you think it was there right in front of her, looking at her with green eyes? Ginger, the farmer cat! Poor Little Miss Tiny. Ginger grinned, showing his teeth. "Help!" screamed Mr. Tiny at the top of her voice. "Oh, Sam Ginger grin, another grin. Every day, Mr. String went to Home Farm to buy some eggs. He liked eggs. That day, he was walking home across the farmer's yard when he heard a very tiny squeak. He stopped. There it was again, round the corner. He looked round the corner. She saw Ginger and the poor trapped little Miss Tiny. "Stop!" said Mr. Strong to Ginger and picked up little Miss Tiny very gently. "Hello," he said. "Who are you?" "I'm Tiny." "You are, aren't you?" smiled Mr. Strong. "Well, if I was as tiny as you, I wouldn't go wander around the large farmer yard." But, said Mr. Tiny and told Mr. Strong about how she was so lonely she had to came out to find somebody to talk. "Oh dear," said Mr. Strong. "Well, now let's see if you can find you some friends to talk to." And now every week, Mr. String collects Mrs. Teeny and takes her off to see her friend. 3 weeks ago, he took her to see Mr. Funny, who told her so many jokes she just couldn't stop laughing all day. 2 weeks ago, he took her to see Mr. Grindley. He told her his request for his favorite meal. "But that's much too much for tiny little me," she laughed. Mr. Grundy grinned. "For you," he said, "divide by 100. Last week, Mr. Strong took her to see Mr. Slimy, and Mrs. Slimy showed her how to stand on your head." "That's very sleek," giggled little Miss Tiny. "Thank you," replied Mrs. Lee mostly. And guess who she met this week? Somebody who became a special little friend. "I never thought I'd never meet any smaller than myself," let Mr. Small. Little Miss Tiny looked up at him and smiled. You wait till I grow up," she said. That is end of our chapter book. So goodbye.